The night began like any other. The dim glow of the dining room light bathed the mahogany table. Soft music hummed in the background, and my wife, Eliza, sat across from me with her usual poised elegance. She wore that red dress I loved, the one that hugged her figure perfectly, the one she knew would make me melt. Her eyes sparkled, but behind that shimmer was something I couldn't place. Something cold. We were having one of our usual quiet dinners, the kind we'd been having every Friday for years. The routine, I thought, was comforting. Little did I know it was the stage for the performance that would rip my life apart. She set her wine glass down gently, her fingers lingering on the stem. Her lips curved into a smile. Not the warm, inviting one I'd fallen in love with years ago. This was calculated, almost rehearsed. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone light, almost playful. "About honesty." I raised an eyebrow, chuckling. "Is this about me eating the last slice of cake?" Guilty as charged. She didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "No, Jackson. Real honesty. Like, if I told you something terrible, could you forgive me?" The room seemed to chill instantly, and my smile faltered. I tried to play it cool, brushing off the unease creeping up my spine. "Depends on how terrible we're talking. Did you burn my favorite shirt in the dryer again?" Her laugh was soft but hollow. Then she said it. "I don't regret sleeping with my boss." Time stopped. The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy, slicing through the carefully constructed image of our perfect life. I stared at her, my fork frozen mid-air. "What did you just say?" Her gaze didn't waver. "I don't regret it. Richard and I, well, it just happened. It just happened." The way she said it, as if she were discussing the weather, made my blood boil. My chest tightened. My pulse pounded in my ears. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, paralyzed. The smile on her face never faded. "I thought you should know. I hate secrets." Hate secrets? The woman who spent hours locked away with her phone, always quick to dismiss my questions. Hated secrets? The worst part wasn't even the confession. It was the lack of remorse. No apology, no hesitation. Just a smug little smile, as if she were daring me to react. I pushed my chair back, the screech of wood against tile breaking the tense silence. "You're joking." "I'm not." Her voice was calm, almost bored. "And you can yell, throw things, cry, whatever you need to do. But I won't apologize." I walked out that night, slamming the door behind me, but her words followed me like a curse. As I drove aimlessly through the dark streets, one thought kept looping in my mind. She doesn't regret it. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, her face appeared, that twisted, cold smile still frozen in my mind. I kept replaying her words, trying to make sense of them, trying to figure out how everything we'd built, everything I thought was real, could shatter so completely in a single sentence. Eliza, my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, had just confessed to sleeping with her boss. And worse, she didn't regret it. The next morning, I forced myself out of bed, but I couldn't look at her. Not after what she'd said. Not after everything. The house felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in on me, pressing me into this reality that I wasn't sure I wanted to be part of anymore. We had breakfast together, but there was no warmth in the room. The silence between us was thicker than ever. I could feel her eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to look back at her. I wasn't ready for whatever act she was going to put on next. "So, are we going to talk about last night?" she asked casually, as if the world hadn't just crumbled at my feet. I didn't answer right away. I didn't trust myself to speak. What could I possibly say to someone who had shattered my world so effortlessly? Instead, I just picked at my food, pushing the eggs around my plate. "Jackson." Her voice was more insistent this time, though there was still no real emotion in it. No regret, no apology. Just the sound of a woman waiting for her husband to acknowledge the inevitable. I looked up, finally meeting her gaze. There was no remorse in her eyes, no guilt. Instead, there was a strange sense of entitlement, like she had every right to do what she'd done. "How long, Eliza?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to remain calm. How long has this been going on? Her eyes flickered for just a second before she shrugged. A few months. Richard and I have been closer lately. But it wasn't about you. It was about me. I just needed something different, Jackson. Something more. Something more? She needed more? What was I then? Just the man who paid the bills and put a roof over her head? I couldn't believe the audacity of it. The nerve to sit there and justify her actions with such hollow excuses. There was no recognition of the damage she'd done. No understanding of the trust she'd broken. I stood up abruptly, pushing my chair back with more force than necessary. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice rising, the anger I had buried for so long finally surfacing. You just ruined everything. You don't get to walk away from this like it's nothing. We had something real, Eliza. I thought you were my partner, my equal. But this, I gestured between us, the emptiness that hung in the air. This is nothing but a lie. She didn't flinch. In fact, she looked almost amused. You're overreacting, Jackson. It's not like you're some angel either. You've had your moments, your secrets. My chest tightened at her words. She was trying to turn this back on me, but I wasn't going to let her. I had never betrayed her. Not once. And now I could feel something inside me snapping. Some quiet part of me that had been holding on, trying to make sense of the woman I thought I knew. I grabbed my keys from the counter, not sparing her another glance. I couldn't look at her anymore. Not after what she'd just said. Not after the cold indifference in her voice. I needed to think, to get away. I drove without a destination in mind, letting the miles pass beneath me, each one taking me further from her, from the life we once had. And yet, despite the physical distance, my mind kept returning to the same place, the moment she had said those words. I don't regret it. It echoed in my ears, louder than any of the other thoughts, and I realized that this was no longer just about her betrayal. This was about me, about who I had become by staying in a marriage where lies and deceit had been hiding in plain sight. I had to make a choice. Was I going to accept this, to forgive her and move forward, pretending it never happened? Or was I going to fight for something more than just this hollow existence? And as the answer began to form in my mind, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without consequences. It was late when I finally returned home. The house was quiet, but the silence felt oppressive, as if it had a weight of its own. Eliza wasn't there. I wasn't sure where she went, and frankly, I didn't care. I walked straight to the study, to the desk where I kept the things that mattered to me. There, hidden beneath a stack of old papers, was a notebook I hadn't touched in years. It was worn, its leather cover cracked from age, but it had always been a place for my thoughts. Dark, private thoughts I never shared with anyone. I didn't even know why I still kept it, but tonight, it felt like the only thing that might bring some clarity to the mess that was my life. I flipped it open, running my fingers over the pages filled with long-forgotten scribbles. But this time, it wasn't nostalgia that drew me in. It was a purpose. I had to know everything. I spent the next few hours poring over my notes, thoughts, and memories of the past. With each turn of the page, I realized that my life with Eliza had been more of a series of lies than I had ever been willing to admit. I had ignored the little things, her late nights, her excuses, the way she had started distancing herself from me emotionally. But now, as I sat there, staring at the pages in front of me, a new plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't just confront her and walk away. No, that would be too simple, too easy. She needed to feel the weight of her betrayal. I would make her regret this, every word, every action. And I wasn't going to let her know what I was planning. I closed the notebook, the weight of my decision settling in. This was no longer just about getting back at her. It was about taking back control of my life. The next few days felt like a game I was no longer interested in playing. I could see the cracks in everything. Our house, our conversations, the very air between us. Eliza tried to act normal, but I saw through the facade. She was trying to pretend that nothing had happened, that we could just move on like we always did. But the truth was out now, and there was no going back. I let her make the first move. She asked about my day, about the meetings at work, and I gave her simple answers. She didn't deserve any more from me. But her eyes, those eyes, kept darting back to me, as if she expected me to crack. She was waiting for me to break down, for me to beg her to take me back. But that wasn't going to happen. I kept my distance, both physically and emotionally. The house, once a shared space, now felt like a battlefield. She would do her best to keep up appearances, doing laundry, preparing dinner, offering me the same smiles that used to melt me. But now they were empty, fake. Then, one evening, the opportunity came. We were both at a dinner party with friends, a group we had been socializing with for years. The whole evening was carefully orchestrated. Laughter, drinks, polite conversation. Everyone pretending everything was just fine. But I had other plans. I overheard Eliza talking to one of her friends, and as soon as I heard her name, Rachel, I knew it was the right moment. Rachel was the one who had always been so supportive of Eliza, her confidant, her partner in crime, and I'd never liked her. She always had this way of twisting things, feeding Eliza's insecurities with just the right words. I made sure Rachel saw me as I casually walked over to them. The surprise in her eyes was almost too easy to read. But I smiled and greeted her with a handshake, my voice polite but firm. I heard you've been helping Eliza out with some personal advice lately, I said, my words slipping out as casually as possible. Rachel's face immediately changed. She tensed, her eyes flickering to Eliza, who stood nearby, her own face going pale. "Oh, just a little," Rachel replied, her voice far too defensive. Just helping her through things. Eliza's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Her eyes locked on me, and I could feel the tension building. I turned my attention back to Rachel. "I'm glad she has someone she can trust," I said, smiling coldly. "I just think it's good for her to have people around who are supportive." I let the words hang in the air, dripping with meaning. It was subtle, deliberate, a quiet bomb planted, ready to explode. Eliza knew exactly what I was doing. But this was just the beginning. The evening dragged on, but the seed I had planted was already beginning to grow. I could feel Eliza's eyes on me, watching my every move, her carefully crafted mask starting to slip. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife, and yet, she still didn't fully understand the depth of what I was doing. When we got home later that night, I didn't say a word to her. I could see she was trying to figure me out, analyzing my behavior, wondering what the hell I was planning. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of an answer. I just went about my business, pretending nothing was wrong, as if the night had been nothing more than a brief interruption to our usual routine. But inside I was plotting. I was playing the long game now. Eliza thought she had everything figured out, but she had no idea how far I was willing to go. The next day, I put the pieces into motion. I began to subtly feed her insecurities, showing her just enough of the cracks in our life to make her second-guess everything. I started bringing up things from our past, the small, seemingly insignificant moments that should have meant nothing but now had a different weight. I would casually mention things that made her question herself, like how distant I had become, how quiet our nights were, how little we had in common anymore. I'd ask her, "Do you ever wonder if this is the life you really wanted, Eliza? Is this enough for you?" Each time, I'd watch her struggle to answer, her discomfort growing with every word. The guilt was starting to eat at her, and I could see it in the way her smile faltered, how her voice wavered just a little. But the real trap hadn't yet been sprung. I was still setting the stage, still waiting for the perfect moment. And when that moment came, it would be a confession she would never be able to escape. I knew she was already feeling the pressure. It was only a matter of time before she cracked. The question was, when? The days dragged on, but the weight of what I was doing felt heavier with each passing hour. The house became a battlefield. Eliza was on edge, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, but I could see the cracks in her demeanor. She was unraveling, and I was quietly watching it happen, waiting for the moment when she would finally slip. Came sooner than I expected. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone, Eliza walked in, her footsteps unsteady, her face flushed. She was visibly upset, but I didn't say anything. I had learned that the best way to make someone confess was to let them stew in their own guilt. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, staring at the floor. Her voice, when it came, was small, almost afraid. "Jackson, I think we need to talk." I set my phone down, looking at her without saying a word. The silence between us hung heavy, like a rope tightening around her neck. She knew what was coming, and so did I. I've been thinking," she began, her words fumbling, "about everything, about what I did. And I hate myself for it." There it was, the crack, the guilt, the shame, the confession I had been waiting for. "You should," I said coldly. "You've ruined everything. You think you can just come to me now, after all this time, and act like it never happened? Like I'm supposed to just forgive you?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. Terrible mistake. But it wasn't because I don't love you." I stood up, walking over to her slowly, deliberately. "Love? Is that what you call this? Because I don't see love, Eliza. I see betrayal. I see someone who couldn't care less about the person they swore to be with for the rest of their life." Her tears started to fall freely now, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her guilt. She reached out to me, but I stepped back, keeping the distance between us. "I was weak," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to feel something again. I wanted to feel alive." I let her words sink in. Her confession didn't make me feel vindicated. It only made me more disgusted. But I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. "I don't care about your excuses," I said, my voice low and deadly calm. "You've done something that can't be undone. And now you're going to feel what I've felt every day since you said those words to me." The look on her face was one of complete defeat. She could see the coldness in my eyes. She knew I wasn't just angry anymore. I was beyond anger. I was determined. I watched as she crumbled in front of me. And in that moment, I realized I had won. The next few days felt like a game of chess, each move calculated and deliberate. I could tell Eliza was trying to fix things, trying to somehow crawl her way back into my good graces. But I wasn't having it. Not anymore. I had made my decision. There was no going back now. Every conversation, every glance, every touch between us felt like a cruel reminder of what she had done. I could almost taste the bitterness on my tongue, and it fueled my determination. One evening, I watched her as she tried to make dinner, the tension in the air so thick it was suffocating. She was doing everything in her power to make amends. Cooking, cleaning, offering weak smiles, but it was all a show. I wasn't interested in her apologies. I didn't need them. What I needed was for her to feel what I had felt. The cold, the loneliness, the slow burn of betrayal that twisted every memory of our life together into something ugly. That night, I made my move. I called her into the living room, sitting down in the chair with a deliberate calmness. "Eliza, we need to talk." She froze. The color drained from her face, but she nodded, walking towards me. "I'm done," I said simply, staring into her eyes. "This is over. I'm not going to play this game anymore." Her expression twisted, a mix of panic and disbelief. "Jackson, no. Please. I can fix this." No. You can't." I interrupted, my voice firm. "You already chose, and now it's time for me to choose." I could see the defeat in her eyes. The woman who once held all my love now looked like a stranger, pleading for something she didn't deserve. And in that moment, I knew I had won. The days that followed were unbearable. Eliza's attempts to fix things grew more desperate, more obvious. She tried calling me, texting, even leaving notes around the house, asking for another chance. But I couldn't be fooled. She was only doing it because she wanted to avoid the consequences of her actions, not because she genuinely regretted what she had done. I felt something inside me shift. The last remnants of affection I had for her were gone, replaced by a cold, calculating detachment. What she had done was unforgivable, and no amount of begging or pleading was going to change that. One evening, she came to me with tears in her eyes, holding a small box in her hands. She opened it to reveal a necklace, a gift we had once talked about getting for each other. It was the same design we had admired years ago, a symbol of our connection. But now it felt like a mockery. "I was going to give this to you on our anniversary," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, Jackson, I want to fix this. I love you. I'll do anything." I stared at the necklace, the old memories rushing back, but they were all tainted now. "You don't love me," I said, the words cold and final. "If you did, you wouldn't have done what you did. You wouldn't have betrayed me like that." She collapsed to her knees, her hands trembling. "Please, I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me." I stood there, watching her, feeling nothing but disgust. "You're too late," I said softly but firmly. "You already left me the moment you made that choice." And with that, I walked away. I wasn't coming back this time. The days after I told her it was over were oddly quiet. Eliza stayed in her room and I stayed in mine. There was no more arguing, no more fake apologies. It was as if the silence between us was the loudest sound in the house. But I could sense the storm building. She was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through her fingers, and I could feel her resentment simmering beneath the surface. Couldn't blame her. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. I spent my time gathering my thoughts, planning my next steps. She thought she could manipulate me, make me feel sorry for her, but I wasn't playing that game anymore. I was done being the victim. I didn't want to rush into anything. I wanted her to feel the absence, to feel what it was like to have lost everything. I was ready for the final blow, but I would make sure it landed when she least expected it. I kept my distance, barely speaking to her. But I knew she was watching me, trying to figure out what I was thinking, what I was planning. The tension in the air was thick, but it was different now. It wasn't just about her guilt anymore. It was about her fear. I could almost taste it. And then, one evening, as I came home after a long day, I found the envelope. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, sealed with the most professional of care. My name was written on it in careful handwriting. I opened it without a second thought, the contents spilling onto the table in front of me. It was a copy of the affair. Everything in black and white. The evidence, the phone numbers, the hotel receipts. She had no idea that I already knew. The evidence was in front of me, neatly laid out like a cruel puzzle that I had already solved. But now that I held it all in my hands, it didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. No, it felt worse. Much worse. Eliza had no idea how far I had gone, how much I knew. She thought she had been careful, but I had been watching her every move, piecing together the fragments of her lies. The receipts, the texts, the photos, all of it confirmed what I had already known. She had betrayed me in the most personal way possible. I stared at the papers for a moment longer, my hands clenched into fists. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that she had so easily thrown away everything we had. I could hear her footsteps behind me, but I didn't turn. The final moment was coming, and I had to make sure I was prepared. She stood in the doorway, her voice trembling. "Jackson, I know what you found." I turned to face her slowly, my expression cold, unreadable. "Do you?" Her face twisted in anguish, her eyes filling with tears. "Please, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake, and I've regretted it every day since." I shook my head, cutting her off. "You don't get to apologize now, not after everything you've done. You don't get to come crawling back and pretend like I'm going to forgive you." She took a step toward me, her hand outstretched. "Jackson, please, I need you. I love you." I laughed bitterly. Love? That's rich coming from someone who destroyed everything we had for a few moments of selfish pleasure. You have no idea what love is. She recoiled, her face crumpling with the weight of my words. "I loved you," I continued, my voice low, icy. "But now you'll pay for what you did." Her eyes widened, realizing that I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. Without saying another word, I turned and walked out, leaving her standing there, shattered. The price of betrayal was much higher than she had ever imagined. The last few weeks felt like a slow, inevitable descent. I moved out. It wasn't dramatic or filled with shouting. It was quiet, methodical, and final. I packed my things. Clothes, books, a few personal items, and left the house we had once shared. Eliza had begged me to stay. She had apologized over and over, crying, pleading, trying to explain how much she had changed and how sorry she was. But nothing could fix the damage now. There were no more second chances. I had already made peace with the decision. My heart had hardened in ways I never thought it could, and I realized that what I was leaving behind wasn't just a house or a relationship. It was the remnants of the person I used to be. The person who believed in love. The person who trusted. But I wasn't that person anymore. I took one last look at the house, at the life that had once felt like home. There was nothing left for me there, and nothing worth saving. As I drove away, I couldn't help but think about what she had lost, what we had lost. But in the end, it didn't matter. Eliza had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. And me? I was finally free. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the betrayal itself. It's the decision to walk away. But when you're left with nothing but lies, there's no other choice but to reclaim your life, piece by painful piece. What do you think? Could you ever walk away from someone you loved if they betrayed you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories like this one.